Up next, then, we're going to talk about, well, the migration and a possible US-UK trade deal with Mark Littlewood. He's Director of Popular Conservatism. Very, very good morning to you.
Hi, Julia. Great to be with you.
Let's start, if we can, with the possibility of this trade deal. It would be the first sign since what Trump called Liberation Day, when he announced it was an extraordinary press conference in the Rose Garden of the White House, where he announced all these big tariffs. We got low off lightly, just the 10%. And then everyone else pretty much went down to 10%, but we've still got the hit, the 25% hit on car exports, steel and aluminium. We're told there's an announcement at 3 o'clock today from the President Trump in the Oval Office. Keir Starmer has said that a trade deal would help to deliver security and renewal for British workers, business and families. He's speaking this morning. He said, as you know, talks with the US have been ongoing. You'll hear more from me about that later today. But make no mistake, I will always act in our national interest for workers, business and families to deliver security and renewal for our country. What do we expect to hear?
Very good question. I mean, it's great, isn't it, Julia, to see a British Prime Minister using our Brexit freedoms to try and strike trade deals with other countries in the world, even if he didn't actually want those Brexit freedoms himself.
Exactly.
But nevertheless, this is good to see. Look, I don't know. And the Trump administration, I understand, caught the UK government a bit by surprise by sort of tweeting out in capital letters that there was going to be a huge, massive, big announcement with a big, respected country, which we assume to be the United Kingdom.
We're quite excited they think that about us, aren't we?
Yeah, great. I love the flattery. It's a slightly idiosyncratic way to behave, but nevertheless, I'll take the flattery. Look, what I'll be looking for is, does this just sort of unravel the tariffs that would otherwise been imposed? In which case, fine, that's a step forward, but it only really gets us back to where we were, 2 or 3 months ago before Trump won the election.
But nevertheless, that would make a difference to jobs and companies. But that would be significant for those working in those industries.
Oh, of course. But it would be, if you like, undoing a recent harm rather than actually seizing some bigger, brighter benefits. Yeah. So I hope it goes further than just removing the tariffs that would otherwise be imposed. But look, it's good news. And we've had the India deal, which, again, we should look at the details of. I've got one or two worries about some of the details in that. Let's look at what happens here. But the more we can facilitate the free flow of goods and services between ourselves and the United States of America, the better. Yeah. So if that's a step in that direction, hurrah.
The focus is on jobs here, and again, a lot of high-skilled jobs in those industries. But there's also, it's always this bleeding sort of thing that comes up, like, what about chlorinated chicken? As if these people haven't had buffalo wings in New York or Florida or LA, which, by the way, would have chlorinated. I don't know what people are so obsessed with. We have chlorinated lettuce and salad. We seem to cope just fine with that. But also protecting our beloved NHS as well from encroachment from America. Why are there so many concerns about this still?
I don't know, but let's hear the concerns of the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. I've dug up a tweet from him. David Lammy says on Twitter, "Be in no doubt. A trade deal with Donald Trump will mean US corporations get to privatise and dismantle our NHS one bed at a time." That's David Lammy's rather grim view of it. Now, he did send that tweet in 2019, but I'd like to know what's changed from 2019 to 2025. Look, it's ludicrous. The idea that Donald Trump or the Americans would want to buy our NHS, what would possess them?
We don't even want our NHS.
Well, it doesn't make any money, right? It loses a vast amount of money. But on a more serious point, look, if we can facilitate the more easier and cheaper transfer of, American pharmaceutical products, for example, that would help the NHS. Yeah. The idea that sort of any American or any American product ever touching anything to do with British healthcare is a nightmare. What a ludicrous way to look at it. Must be completely the opposite, whatever our Foreign Secretary thinks.
There is usually that rule, isn't there? Well, let's talk about also immigration and asylum stories today. Not only this staggering revelation from the National Audit Office that asylum accommodation, including hotels, and the vast majority are still in hotels, it was 110,000 back in December, so it's a good, quite a few tens of thousands bigger than that now. It's costing the taxpayer £4.5 million a day, and over 10 years, from 2019 to 2029, costing £15 billion. Now, that is 3 times what it was estimated to cost just 6 years ago, because we've had such an increase in the numbers and, of course, increase in the profits from the organisations like Serco, who are making all those deals and making all that money. This at the same time, as we're told by the leaks from the government, that an announcement is going to be made next week in terms of an immigration law that migrants who come here are going to be required to have a high standard of fluent English, both written and verbal, far more than the basic English skills they need right now. What do you make of both those stories?
Well, I mean, the hotel thing's a complete mess. Worth remembering that Labour promised to close down asylum hotels. This is going to be yet another immigration...
And smash the gangs.
I mean, none of these are going to come to pass at all, are they? So yet another government with yet another promise on immigration, which is once again going to be broken. Look, there's a multitude of different things here, and I think sometimes we look at this problem down the wrong end of the telescope. I would say that one of the problems we've got is our legal structure makes it damned near impossible to deport anybody in anything like rapid time.
Yeah.
So if you're going to spend 18 months or so, sometimes longer, processing an asylum claim, what are you going to do with that person while you're processing that asylum claim? Answer, you're probably going to put them up in a hotel or something similar. So in order to truncate that, why don't we actually focus on the length of time it's taking?
Yeah.
If you have endless appeals under the European Convention of Human Rights and the Human Rights Act, and you've got clever lawyers who can conjure up sometimes the most minor and trivial issues
chicken nuggets
nuggets and God knows what else. I've got too many friends on Facebook. That was the latest one I'd heard. Meant you couldn't be deported from the country. If that's going to take 18 months, we're going to face a colossal hotel bill.
Yeah.
So we've got to truncate that system. I'm not suggesting you can make a decision in 18 hours, but maybe in 18 days, right, rather than 18 months. And you put much more burden on the person seeking asylum to prove their case rather than on the government.
The trouble is, the point at which they're not approved, we still can't get rid of them.
No, that's right. So it needs to, I mean, that's
called almost by the by, isn't it? What do you make of, well, the main thing is they're not to be in the first place, I would say. And again, we know perfectly well that actually what this government's going to end up doing is they're not going to approve people for asylum. They're going to give them indefinite leave to remain. They'll be on the books. We'll still be paying for them. We'll just be paying for them through benefits and their housing benefit instead of this hotel accommodation. What do you make of the Germans, though? Because the new Friedrich Merz government, this sort of Labour-Tory coalition, effectively, very anti the AfD and their policies on immigration, basically closing the borders. They are actually rescinding Angela Merkel's 2015 order, which basically opened Germany up to pretty much anyone who wanted to turn up. And we saw those 1 million people arriving, some claiming to be from Syria, many not from there. But basically saying that third country nationals, without documents should basically be the default, should be turn them back at the border. You literally don't allow them across the border. That'll put pressure on neighbouring countries, particularly Austria, where a lot of people are arriving through. One assumes then the people in Austria will insist that the government says, well, we won't accept them either, and you cannot go back to the borders. Could this be the beginning of the end of the madness on the European continent?
Yeah, I mean, it does look like the start of some sort of common sense. And I think you're right, Julia, that if, Germany go down this path, there will be that domino effect, right? And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that you've got to, I think, switch the burden of proof. If somebody just turns up, puts their hand in the air, says, I'm terribly sorry, I've lost all of my paperwork, but, believe me, I'm of this or that sexuality or a member of this or that political party, or I have this or that beliefs, you can't possibly send me home. The authorities then need to try and disprove that. Well, I would put the burden of proof on the individual, not the burden of disproof on the authorities. And what's interesting is these sort of ideas would have been described as sort of far-right lunacy only a few months ago. Well, the new, very wet, very middle-of-the-road German government seems to be willing to embrace a much tougher plan than the Labour government is even willing to contemplate. So I would take a leaf out of the Germans' books and do that sort of thing here as well.
Well, yeah, we shall see. They may be forced to do so, eh? Really good to talk to you, Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. Philip Ingram, your response to that?
I agree. We could take the leaf out of the Germans' books and we could be much harder, and it wouldn't be difficult with the size of majority that the government's got in Parliament to make sure that the law was clarified, that you couldn't have these endless appeals to keep people here.
But the main thing is to stop people coming in, whether it's on the boats or whether it's, you know, being able to climb. Well, this idea of a crackdown on the countries where people are arriving who have a very bad track record of going, oh, it turns out after my student visa is over, I need to stay here.
And we need offshore processing. And one other thing that Mark said, you know, the NHS, American companies coming in. My father-in-law had his heart traces sent off to a company so that they get them interpreted on behalf of the NHS to get it in, because it's the most cost-effective way of doing it. It's an American-based company. We're already getting services from America. It doesn't mean we're selling the NHS out. It doesn't mean we're going to be paying US rates for stuff. It's still free for him at the point of need.
Absolutely.